Okay, Thomas Neumann, you're from AVERE. Let's talk a little bit about what this organization, the European Association of Electromobility, does, and also talk about how laws are being created in Europe, and then basically go to the member state and what we can expect in the future. So first, what is AVERE?
So AVERE is the European Association for Electromobility. We're based in Brussels, and basically what we do is a bit twofold. On the one hand, we provide a network for our members to kind of basically link up the efforts for electromobility across Europe, coordinate them, make sure that there's contacts between the industry. And on the other hand, it's basically that we take the input from the industry, take it to policymakers in Brussels, and also translate kind of what is going on in Brussels, the political language, into the language of the industry, and telling them, okay, this is what you should pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk first the members. Who are the members and what kind of category in the industry are they?
So we basically cover the entire value chain. Our members are on the one hand national associations, and on the other hand also direct industry members. On the industry member side, we have everything from car manufacturers to charging point operators, charging point producers, all of that. Basically the entire ecosystem.
The OEMs too?
OEMs too,
the
yeah.
Cars, yeah.
Yeah, so we have a few American OEMs and one Chinese one right now. It's a site where we're actually quite expanding.
The whole German industry, I mean, is the BMWs and the Mercedes, are they also on board?
They tend to be represented by the more traditional car maker associations. We tend to be a bit more ambitious in our positioning, so right now, at least at the moment, they're not yet there.
They're indirect members. So okay, so indirectly the OEMs, then the charging operators, and what kind of other big things are there?
So obviously we have the national associations, and that is really a big part. So if you count everything up, there is a lot of industry members, I think 2,400 industry members last indirectly via our associations, and also users actually. So over 100,000 EV users that we indirectly represent via our association members.
Yeah, like us too in the Netherlands, we're the Dutch Association of Electric Drivers, and we have 10,000 members. So we're also directly or indirectly connected. I don't even have an idea. Okay, how many people work on the staff bureau of AVERE?
Full-time 3 plus 2 part-time.
Okay, so it's extremely small.
It's limited, but
limited. Okay, and then you have to basically organize a lot of things in the B2B, get everybody connected and thinking and coming up with standards and that kind of stuff. So a whole bunch of events are being organized in that way?
Yes, absolutely. So we have obviously one headline conference that's coming up now in June, EVS 35 in Oslo. And
be there, we'll be there, yeah.
Everyone is invited, and then we have regular, let's say, smaller events, policy discussions in Brussels, for example, that we do. So yeah, inviting everyone that may be watching to attend these.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about regulation on the European scale. What are the hot subjects nowadays?
That's very difficult to pinpoint because everything that's relevant for e-mobility is under revision right now. As you may know, the EU has had a legally binding target to be climate neutral in 2050 with interim targets in 2030. And basically to now put this into concrete legislation, everything is being revised. So just to name a few files that we're following, car CO2 standards. The Commission has proposed to phase out internal combustion engines in 2035. Discussion is going on. We're trying to safeguard that or even go quicker. There's the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, massive file about binding targets for member states to roll out the infrastructure to support these electric vehicles and their rollout. Also technical provision, card payment, price displays, all of that is in there. Energy performance of buildings directive for private charging in buildings, so a renewable energy directive, emissions trading.
Say the charging systems for internal in apartments?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the energy performance of buildings directive, yeah, also offices, for example, in all new and renovated buildings. We would also like to see existing buildings included. So that's there. There's the renewable energy directive, basically making sure that renewable energy, when it is charged, is appropriately compensated and supported. Which one did I forget? Emissions trading system, basically putting a price on upstream on the fuels, the transport fuels, which might give a financial incentive to switch to, for example, electrification. So we have a lot of big files that are currently being revised and doing our best to, achieve optimum outcomes for our membership there and for mobility as a whole.
And also little things like recycling batteries or something like that. Is that also part of the legislation process?
Absolutely, yeah. So the file there, I guess, would be the battery regulation. That's now in the final stage. There is negotiations between Parliament and Council about the final shape of the outcome, and we're still engaging there to achieve a sustainable but competitive European battery industry.
Okay. Is Europe also really actively trying to get batteries produced in Europe? Is that real practical policy, or is it more a dream?
Yeah, so Europe is making some efforts. We have the battery regulation, which kind of sets the legal framework. We're engaging, as I said, to make sure that it remains practical and really supports a competitive industry. There's also the European Battery Alliance, kind of bringing together stakeholders to link them up and to really make sure that there's industrial collaboration. So the EU is doing its best, and it's actually showing some success, right? So we have these mega factories, now gigafactories in Europe popping up, which a few years ago Europe was nowhere in terms of battery production. So it is starting to get some momentum, which is nice.
So this is a huge amount of activity in all kinds of different fields. How can you with 5 people do something about it, or is it more that you have all kinds of members who are working in work groups and preparing all kinds of stuff?
Yeah, so obviously we work with our members and we have internal working groups where everyone comes together. We do also partially run the input of our members, obviously. We do things from the secretariat side as well. In the end, I think we do manage to punch quite a bit above our weight. Are quite frequently cited in Brussels media. We do meetings with policymakers, stakeholders. But indeed, our members support us there. Our members go with us to the meetings. Our members give us all the input that we need for our position papers. And then in the end, it's, I guess, partially a prioritization process, but we do manage to be active on all the main files.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you see the European community? Are they really a big help to accelerate EV adaptation, or do they also come up with all kinds of legislation which are also difficult and impossible that they're not practical?
Sorry, member states you were?
No, the European community, the legislation which comes out of it, how sane is it? How practical is it? How reasonable is it? How helpful is it?
Depends. Yeah. In general, things are moving in the right direction right now. So we have this move towards a clear phase-out date, which might give certainty to industry away from internal combustion engines towards electrification. We have the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, binding rollout targets, so we make sure that we have enough infrastructure to support these vehicles also as we go along. So it's really going in the right direction. And then there are some details where it's a bit more contested, right? So in terms of the technical provisions on charging infrastructure, for example. And these details we need to get right, and that's what we're working on. But in general, Europe is really waking up to this change to electric mobility. And we are seeing that the momentum is on our side, which is nice.
This 2035 phase out of the new combustion engine, is that really going to happen, or is that in 2030 they say, oh, it's not practical, we need to around 2045, 2050? How real does it feel in in Brussels and in everywhere around it?
The argument will certainly be made by interested parties in Brussels. What we are seeing is right now it's very close majorities and very close margins either way, depending on the vote. Obviously, there's multiple instances which this has to go through. We had a very big vote in the Environment Committee on Wednesday, where actually it was backed to have this 2035 phase-out target, but this needs to go now through the plenary of the Parliament, then it needs to go into Council-Parliament negotiations. We're very much hoping it will be safeguarded. We would have hoped for a bit more of a stronger trajectory already for the 2020s, because that would basically ensure that by 2030 we're already closer. So a binding interim trajectory is important. We continue to engage to achieve this. But for the moment, we are optimistic that the 2035 target will be achieved and that it will be safeguarded by Parliament and Council. Okay. That's our point.
Talking about details, like the way we have now have a nice system in Europe where you have interoperability between charging poles. But there's also a desire that you can use your debit pass or something like that. There's also legislation coming from that department. Where is that going to?
So in terms of payment, what we're seeing is that, well, it's a bit not certain where it's going right now. It's also under
describe the different ideas.
So we have the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation. The Commission had initially proposed that only fast chargers over 50 kilowatt would have to offer card payment, mandatory card payment. And then for slower chargers, it would have been possible to, for example, offer a QR code. Also retrofits would have been limited to fast chargers. Now it's in Parliament and Council. Council is basically more or less sticking with the Commission approach, while Parliament is going much more ambitious, basically demanding card payment and card readers on every charger, also slow chargers, and also demanding retrofits. The year is still in discussions. We'll have to see. It's all not final. But we see these very different positions, and in the end it will be about the trilogue negotiations, so when Council and Parliament come back together, and about how they find a compromise.
And how can you influence as AVERE this discussion to keep it a little bit practical?
Well, multiple ways. So obviously we have a position paper with our members that we've come up with. On the basis of that, we have met policymakers. We're talking to the relevant member states. We're talking to the relevant members of the European Parliament. We are teaming up with partners of ours as well. So we had a joint letter recently with Charin and Eurelectric, the installers industry, and electricity industry. And with those together, we are engaging and we are trying to convince policymakers of our points of view, of our positions.
And so you meet with lots of people from Parliament and try to educate them and basically tell them about your point of view.
Exactly, yeah. We try to bring forward our points, our arguments, and hope that they stick and that policymakers see our points. Yeah. Sometimes we also do, for example, events. So we have multiple channels. But yeah, a big channel are indeed these bilateral exchanges with policymakers.
What's your role in AVERE?
I'm policy manager, so I'm leading the policy team, or many aspects of our policy work. And yeah, exactly this aspect of making our points heard in political Brussels together with another colleague.
So if you compare, a lot of rules are made at the United Nations level. For example, autonomous driving cars is United Nations level, which I had no idea that was the case. And then you have European level, you have American laws, and laws in Asia and China. How good are we in Europe with our laws and our regulations?
Europe, I think, is quite advanced. I mean, we're not usually as quick in terms of like allowing new technologies to be deployed as, for example, the US, where it's a bit more innovation-driven, maybe. But in the end, it's a process of due diligence, basically, and making sure that what we let on the roads actually works. Yeah. Actually, in terms of UN harmonization, we are a consultative expert at UNECE level, so we're actually involved in that process as well. Oh, okay. But we do see that there's some harmonization going on, and we're hoping that this process will obviously continue because we have a young market. Many things are not yet standardized, so we'll have to see. It's about striking a balance between being innovative, but also basically ensuring interoperability while leaving space for innovation.
Last question about this whole autonomous driving rules and regulation with the United Nations and Europe. What are there the hot topics?
On autonomous driving, I will say that I cannot answer these questions specifically. We have other experts within our membership that deal with autonomous driving, so we'll have to pass on that one.
Okay, I'll come back to Oslo and basically see if I can connect to some people who know all about it. Thank you very much for your explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
See you in Oslo.
See you there.